Hello everyone, welcome to our new video tutorial, and today we'll be discussing about task queues. So we are going to continue with the same application that we have been using until now, which is the Data Grid 2 tutorial, but we are going to take a new example this time. Um, Here we'll be calling an external API. So for the task queues example, so the way we are going forward with this one is we have an API that we will call in this case, and this is the API. It just brings a list of cat breeds. So once we have this API endpoint, this is a free API endpoint whom we'll be making a call to. And what it does is when you hit it the first time, you also send a limit of say how many records you want per page, right? So say for example, if this endpoint has 10 different records, and you can say that, oh, you want only 2 records per page. So but we don't know how many records it has, right? So when we make a call to this endpoint, what it will give us in return is it would say that, oh, we have say 10 different records, and you're limiting this to 2 records per page. So we are sending you this first page with 2 records, and then but we have 4 more pages available of data. So if you want, you can use that. You can call different page numbers as well. So that's how we do it. There are multiple different ways to do it, but we're doing it the task queue way. So what we can later do is we can also send what page number we want to call, right? So that's what we'll be doing it. First page we don't give any page number, but for second and page and forward, if there are more than one page, is what we do is we send in the same limit but a page number as well as a page parameter. So every API is different and every endpoint is different. They would have different query parameters, but for this one it is page. So what we do is we call this URL with a limit that will ask the user to input from the UI. That once a user puts in a limit, they can go forward and or will go or this microflow will go forward and fetch those records. And once it fetches those records using this REST call, what we also do is we process those records. And also when we process those records, we'll be looking into multiple things, but let's look at the import mapping. So what the import mapping would return for this one is it will return the first set of records that you requested through the limit, and then it will also send us the page information. This particular API sends us a lot of page info, but we're using only 3 from this one. So what is the current page, what's the last page available, and what's the total, right? So that's what we are going to use. And now total is the total number of records and not the total number of pages. We can get the total number of pages by just taking the last page as a parameter. But what we do is once we get that information through the JSON and import mapping, we further go ahead and process the data and how we want to uh, display it or how we want to store it in the table. And this is not a part of task queue. So once you download this app on your local, or if you already have this app, once you pull in the latest changes, which I'll be committing soon after this video, you'll be able to see how the data is processed. So that's not the scope of this video, but we say so we return the page info object here. Once the data is processed, that the page info object is what we got from the import mapping. Now, once we receive the page info, what we do is we check if the page info object is not empty, which means the data was returned by the API and there was no error in it, or there's no empty records on it. Once we check that, what we also do is if it is more than one pages of data, we go ahead and create a task queue. If it is um, less than one page of data, then or only one page of data, then we return this to a calling nanoflow as with saying, oh, there's only one page of data. Here we say it's 0 pages of data. But if it is more than one page of data, what we do is uh, we call the APIs, and we create a task queue helper. So I have a task queue helper, which is basically nothing but it just checks what is the current page that we are calling through the API, what the last page is. Last page is not that important, but I'm still storing it, maybe for future examples. And if that page is finished loading or not, right? So load it. Now, what we do in that case is first, every time we run the API, we check if there's any older task queues or not. And if there's one, we delete it so that we are not having any orphan records or we are just not storing anything in the database that's already used in the past. We could use non-persistent entities in this case so that we don't have to fetch and delete every time, and it'll be deleted automatically on session deletion. But what happens in this case is that I'm passing this object to a task queue microflow, and you cannot pass a non-persistent object to a microflow that is being called as a task queue. So yeah, I'm setting the page number again. I'm starting the page number as from page number 2 because the page number 1 was already fetched through this endpoint, right? So starting with page 2. So say for example, when we return once the data was processed for first page and the page info object said, oh, last page is page number 10, right? So this while loop will run 9 times and it will create 9 different task queues for us. So how do we do it? So now we create a first a URL, right? Which URL we want to call or what page number we want to call. So first we'll call the page number 2 and then we create a new task helper for each page. That is page number, what the current page number is, what is the last page number. So last page number will remain same for all the task queues, and we set the default for load date to false. And when the task will this particular task will complete its execution, we have a flow that will change it to true. So what we do here is we have another microflow which is similar to this fetch microflow, but what this one does is a bit different. So this one takes the task queue also as a parameter and what URL you want to call. So now, how to create a task queue, right? So you can convert any simple microflow into a task queue simply by clicking this execute this microflow as a task queue button, right? So you check this feature over here and will convert into a task queue. So now what is a task queue again? If you're watching this video, you probably know what a task queue is, but a task queue is basically something where a microflow can be executed multiple number of times, the same microflow in multiple different threads, right? So if you were to turn off this task queue, right, and do okay, then this particular microflow will be processed in series. So first, if you're doing this while loop for say 100 times, then um, this will not step forward until the whole microflow has finished execution, right? So if it is doing some complex logic, then your this whole microflow or the calling microflow would take maybe 100 seconds. You never know, right? Each iteration is if it's 1 second. So but here what it happens is because we're doing it as a task queue, what it does is it sets your it as soon as it puts this microflow execution in a queue, it just moves forward. It doesn't wait for this microflow to finish execution, right? So and now you have to you have to create a task queue. Basically a task queue means how many threads you want to run, right? So if you say if you I've set it as a constant, right? But you can set it up however you want. So if my constant for now is I want to run, sorry, okay, I want to run 3 threads at a time, right? That's what I have set it to. If I set it to 5, then this same microflow, 5 of these microflows will be executed at the same time, right? So if there are 100 waiting in the queue, it will execute 5 at a time instead of like 1 at a time. So that's a thread. So now what this one does is if you go forward, it'll call this API, process the data, and then Once the data processing is complete, I change the status for this one to true. Now, and then I log a message saying, oh, the task page load has been, or this page number has loaded, and the total number of pages are the last page and current page. So that's where uh, I use the task queue helpers current page and last page. So that's one. Now, how do you call everything from the UI, right? So let's go to the UI and manage how we do it. So my UI does this. So say I want to do, it's empty cat breeds right now. So this is my page, and if I do refresh cat breeds, what it does is it will ask you for how many you want to call per page, right? The limit that we saw in the first one. So if you look at this, oh sorry, if you look at this first URL, I'm setting a limit, right? So this is the limit that we are setting. It asks how many you want to call per page. So say I want to call 25 records per page, right? And if I hit fetch, what it does is, what it will do is it'll call this particular nanoflow first. And what this particular nanoflow does is it changes the cat breed helper to say data loaded as false. I'm just using this data loaded and not loaded attribute to display the data grid on page, right? So it'll set it to false. Will show a progress bar, and then it'll do all the records. So this one, what it does is it gets the first page, check if it's more than one pages or data is available. If it's more than one page, it puts all the task queue under execution. And then what it does is, so that once that micro finishes execution, it doesn't have to wait. This microflow won't wait for all the task queues to finish, right? Because it doesn't have to, it can go forward, because those are task queues. So we close the page, that is to close this pop-up. Once the pop-up is closed, we check if more than one page is available or not, through that was returned or not. So if more than one page is available, we go ahead. Otherwise, we just say data loaded as true, right? We hide the progress bar. If it's more than one page, then we know that task queue helpers were created. So we retrieve all the task queue helpers um, through from the database, right? Because it'll only send the current list, because when this particular microflow, when this particular microflow was created, we also delete all the older task queues, right? Before we create new ones. New ones are created over here. So we delete all the old ones, so you won't see the old ones over here. So what we do is we fetch all of them, and we check how many have, or how many are still not loaded. Once it shows, or once it says everything is loaded, uh, or what we just do is we take this list, and from this list we check the loaded variable, and we try to find a single object where it's the loaded is false, right? Which means the task queue is not completed. We need to wait until all of them has finished execution. So all of them have loaded equals true. So we could have put it as running instead of loaded. That would have made more sense. But for some reason, I put it as loaded. So we'll continue with loaded for now. So yeah, once all task queue has finished execution, what we do is we change the uh, get helper bit and say data has loaded, that's true for the page. And once that is done, we again delete all the task queues that were created, uh, right? So and then we log a message saying how many task queues were executed. So if we say if there was 10 pages of data, the first page was not executed as a task queue, and the remaining 9 pages were executed as task queue. So if you have 10 pages, it would this log method would show us as 9 task queues were executed. So once we do that, we hide the progress bar. But say here, if we saw, right, if even one object, if we found an object that was still loading, what we do is we wait for a few seconds, that is 200 milliseconds, and then go back and fetch a list. And so until all the tasks have finished execution, this will keep going on in a loop, and then it will end the loop, right? So that's our logic for tracking each task queue. So say we want to fetch 25 records at a time, and let's go ahead and put a breakpoint on this one so that we can see the whole flow this time. So say fetch, and we see a breakpoint here. So we have a cat breed helper who's, sorry, where you see data loaded as true for the older ones, right? So once we step over, it will say data loaded as false, which is correct. And then we start showing the progress bar, which is here, fetching cat breeds. That's the message we want to show, right? So we do that, and now we fetch the number of pages. So because we did 25 records per page, it says we have 4 pages, right? So we again step over, which means it'll go forward from here. So we step ahead and it closes the page. um, Step forward again, right? Now all the task queue is probably, because we have a breakpoint here, all of them would have finished execution. So I put log messages for each task queue. So let's see. Yep, all 4 pages have loaded, right? So there were 3 task queues and one single page. So once we have done that, we step over and see that there are 3 task queues created, which is correct. And we found none of them to be running. So we go ahead and say um, task queues were done, they are deleted now. And if you look at the console, it says 3 task queue threads were executed, which is correct. This is what we were expecting. And we hide the progress, and we see all the data has loaded, right? So that's how we do task queues here. Now, once we do this, we can also go ahead and see how to do more task queues, right? So say create more tasks. So let's do delete all records first, and then do refresh cat breed. So let's say we want to get uh, 100 records on a page, because we saw there were only 4 pages, so the maximum would be 100 records. So if we do fetch, what it will do is it just says one page loaded is one, right? And total pages is one. Uh, so we have only 98 records, which means everything loaded through one page and it ended at this point and did not go forward. So that's how it is. Let's go into this particular nano flow or microflow and put a breakpoint here and see how everything is executed at the task queue level. So we added a breakpoint here, delete all the records, and save, refresh cat breeds. The way I'm processing the data in this process data is I'm checking for duplicates, and if there's older data already existing on the newer record fetch, um, I don't create new ones, right? So say refresh cat breeds, and it would say I want, yeah, 10 records per page. Once I do this, there's a microframe. So API helper said we need, the limit is 10 per page. So we create a URL. Now the URL looks like this. Uh, Limit equals 10, right? Okay. Once we step over, we get the page info, which means the first page has finished execution. So that's how we got page info. So the page info is that the current page is 1, which is correct, and the last page is 10, which means we have 10 pages, in total 98 records. So we go forward and check data is available, true, because we found page info. We go forward again and see if we have more than one page, and which is correct, we have more than one page, right? So we go forward again. Now we keep going forward and see that is there any old task queue list that's help? No, it's 0, so it will not delete anything. Now we create a page number. So page number is 2, because we already executed the page 1. So we'll go inside the while loop for maybe 1 or 2 loops, but not all 10 loops. So now we go inside and we create, or we change the URL to something else, which is, now the URL is cat ninja breeds limit 10 and page number 2, right? So because we are doing the second page, now step over, and we created a task queue. This task queue helper says that Current page is second, last page is 10, and the loaded is false. We pass this task queue helper to this microflow or this task queue. And you cannot put a breakpoint or you cannot step into a task queue microflow, right? Because it does not run on the same thread, it runs on a different thread. So, also, because we have put a breakpoint here, this might have finished execution by now or no, right? So now what happens is now we change the page number because we need to loop through it again. So we change the page number. Now we see page number is 3. The URL has changed to page number 3, right? The task queue, a new task queue is created because the old one has already been passed to the thread. So the new task queue code has page number 3. A new queue is created now, right? A new task queue for this microflow is created. So now there are two in the flow. But once you let's step out of the loop and we see that already on page 11 because we changed the page here, but now this doesn't matter, right? Because we are sending the last page info that we received here, which is we are going to say to the calling nanoflow that we have 10 different pages. And now once this microflow, or once you step out of this microflow, right, this is when it creates, look, it executes all the other task queues. Now it created these task queues, and just because you created this task queues in series saying page number 2, 3, 4, 5, doesn't mean it has to execute them in the same order. It will execute the threads in a different order. So when you process the data inside the task queue, you need to make sure that you take that into consideration, that pages will not be executed in the same order that you give it to the task. So here you see page number 1 was executed first, and then we sent in 2, but what it processed first was page 4. Then it did 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and executed 7 at the end, right? So task queues don't guarantee you an order in which it has to or it will process the data for you, but it will guarantee that the data will be processed as you're given to it. So that's how we execute task queues. Yeah, I'll be committing these changes right after this, right after I end this video. But yeah, if you want access to this app again, the link is in the description. Please make sure you give me your email address that is your Mendix account and not something that is at Gmail or at Hotmail or something, because you cannot Mendix doesn't allow creating developer accounts on these generic emails. So I will not be able to add you to this project. Yeah, I think that's it for today. Yeah, I'll be coming out with a more challenging video sometime next week or in 2 weeks. So see you then.